They came home when the air was thick with thunder, their gowns whispering through the mud like mourning veils. No one saw them ride through the gate, and yet every dog in the parish howled as if their hooves struck bone instead of earth. It was said the sisters had been gone only one season, though the magnolia trees that lined the road had grown tall enough to hide the house they once called theirs. The wind moved through the branches like someone breathing slowly through teeth. Every petal that fell seemed to bleed the night's humidity, pale and bruised under the weight of an unseen hand. The sky hung low and swollen. Lightning crawled across it without sound. In that light, the sisters' faces looked carved from wax, soft, glistening, and already half melted. One clutched a rosary she never used. The other held her gloves tight to her chest, as though they could keep her sins from escaping. When they reached the gates, the iron finials were slick with rust and rain. One of them whispered, "It still remembers us." The other replied, "Then we are cursed to remember it too." The house stood beyond, pale as a ghost's ribcage, its windows dark and wide as mourning eyes. Every shutter banged loose against the siding, not from the wind but from something inside shifting with impatience. The plantation had always been too quiet after dark. The cicadas stopped near its porch, as though the air around it did not belong to this world. Those who lived downriver said that once you stepped onto its soil, the night refused to end until you confessed what it wanted to hear. The sisters dismounted. The elder's hem caught on a root, tearing open like paper. Beneath the fabric, the mud glistened red. She froze. "It's only the clay," the younger said. But in the lightning's pale flicker, it did not look like clay at all. They walked toward the front steps. The magnolia moon, a swollen pearled thing, watched them rise, its light curling around their shadows. Behind them, the gate swung shut without sound. No wind touched it. Inside, the air smelled of iron and candle soot. Dust hung thick enough to be mistaken for smoke. The hallway stretched too far, the portraits along the walls too many. Each face on the canvas had eyes just slightly averted, as if they feared to look directly at whoever entered. The elder sister lifted her candle. Its flame guttered, though there was no draught. "Did you feel that?" she murmured. The younger only stared upward. At the top of the stairs, a single door stood ajar, trembling as if it had been waiting for them to return. Somewhere deep in the walls, the sound of breathing began, slow, heavy, labored. The house inhaled their scent. They found the parlor untouched. Chairs still half turned toward one another, teacups dusted over but unbroken. On the mantel, their mother's clock ticked, though it had not been wound in years. Tick, pause, tick, a heartbeat misaligned with the living. The elder sister set her candle beside it. The flame bent sideways, drawn toward the clock's small brass keyhole. She reached out, but the younger caught her wrist. "Don't," she whispered. "It's been waiting." From outside came a roll of thunder, not from the sky but from beneath the earth. The magnolia branches scraped the walls like fingernails. They moved through each room in silence. Dust gathered in their footprints like fog trying to follow. In the dining room, the long table remained set for 12. Silverware gleamed faintly, but every goblet was filled to the rim with stagnant rainwater. The reflection in each one trembled as they passed. Not their faces, but a dozen versions of something behind them, standing where no one stood. When they reached the grand hall again, the house seemed to shrink around them. The portraits along the staircase no longer looked away. Their painted eyes glistened as if wet. "Do you hear them?" the younger asked. The elder nodded once. They never stopped. For a moment, thunder split the night so violently the walls shook and the candle died. Darkness pressed close, thick and breathing. In that darkness came a voice, so soft it might have been mistaken for thought. "Welcome home. Your daughters." The sound did not echo, it pulsed, as though spoken from inside the house's wooden heart. The elder reached out, hand trembling in the blackness, searching for her sister's fingers. She found them, cold, damp still. When the lightning flashed again, she realized she was holding nothing at all. And the door at the top of the stairs creaked open wider, spilling a faint golden light that did not belong to this century. Some say that was the night the house took its breath back, and those who walk the fields beneath the magnolia moon still hear the sound of two gowns whispering through the mud, heading home again. The dawn came pale and hesitant, a colorless breath over the magnolia fields. The house stood unchanged by night or light, its timbers swollen with secrets, its silence too deep to be empty. The mist clung to the veranda as though afraid to step inside. They said the house could taste grief, that it drew in sorrow the way roots draw water. Those who lived within never wept for long. Their tears vanished into the floorboards, and something in the walls grew stronger for it. The elder sister awoke to the ticking of the mother's clock, though it had stopped the night before. She found her own breath rising in rhythm with its hollow tuck, as if the air in her chest belonged to the house instead of her. The sheets beneath her were damp and cold. When she lifted them, the imprint of another body lay beside her, faint, shallow, but still warm. In the corridor, the younger sister walked barefoot, her nightgown trailing like smoke. She followed the scent of rain and something sweeter, older, like wilted magnolia left too long in a vase. The hall stretched farther than it had the day before. Doors multiplied where there had been none, each one cracked open just enough to show a sliver of something moving beyond. A whisper followed her steps. Not words, just the sound of a sigh too close to her ear. She stopped at the stairwell. The portraits hung in new order now, faces rearranged. Their painted eyes no longer wept. They stared in recognition. One canvas, their mother's, had turned slightly askew. Behind the frame, the wallpaper bulged, as if something beneath it was breathing. The elder descended the stairs in silence. Her candle burned low, the flame thin and blue. The younger waited at the bottom, gaze fixed on the parlor door. "It's open," she said. No wind had touched it. No hand had turned the latch. Yet the parlor stood ajar, revealing a faint glimmer of light, like dawn trapped inside a bottle. They entered. The room was heavy with the scent of rusted silver and damp lace. The furniture had sunk slightly into the warped floorboards, as though the house had begun to swallow its own past. In the hearth lay ashes that pulsed faintly, as though something still smoldered beneath. Upon the mantel, the clock's hands spun backward once, then stopped at midnight. The elder spoke softly. "Do you remember when they said the house was built on blessed ground?" The younger nodded. "And do you remember who did the blessing?" Neither dared say the name. From the corner of the room came the faint sound of dripping. They turned, no leak, no rain, only the portrait of their father. Its eyes were darker than before, and from the bottom edge of the frame something clear slid down like a tear. The younger reached for it, but the elder pulled her back. "It feeds on that," she said. "Don't give it more." A low hum filled the room. The candlelight shivered, bending toward the hearth. The ashes began to move, swirling in slow circles. The sisters watched as the grey dust gathered into the shape of a cradle, small, fragile, perfect. The elder trembled. "It remembers everything we tried to forget." The cradle faded before their eyes, leaving only a ring of soot. Then faintly from beneath the floor came the sound of breathing again. Closer now, steadier, as though the house itself exhaled through the cracks. The sisters backed away. The door shut behind them without sound. In the hallway, the wallpaper had changed. What once was pale cream now bloomed with faint spreading stains, the color of old blood diluted by years of rain. The elder reached out. The pattern moved under her fingertips like living skin. She whispered, "It's hungry." Outside, the storm began again, though the sky showed no clouds. Lightning flickered within the house, flashes that came from nowhere, lighting the stairwell in brief, ghostly intervals. For a heartbeat each time, the sisters saw figures standing in those flashes, faces they knew, faces that should not have been there. They ran for the door. It did not open. The handle turned, but the wood groaned and held firm, as though the hinges had grown roots into the soil. The younger pressed her ear to the wall. "It's still breathing," she said, and from somewhere deep behind the plaster, a voice answered her whisper with her own, the same tone, the same breath, repeating, "It's still breathing." The elder pulled her away. "Don't listen." But the echo came again, louder now from every direction. "Don't listen, don't listen, don't listen," until the walls themselves seemed to chant the warning in 100 broken voices. Then silence. The house stilled. The clock stopped. The candles went out. Only the scent of magnolia remained, thick and suffocating, curling through the dark like smoke from unseen fire. When morning came, the front door stood open. But no footprints led out. Only in, they say the house ate its own sorrow that night and grew full enough to dream. And in its dreams, It began to remember the sisters not as daughters but as offerings. The evening crept in without color, a slow drowning of light beneath the ribs of the house. Shadows gathered along the staircase like guests returning from the grave. Above them hung the portrait, vast, framed in gold that had long since tarnished to green. Two faces shared the same body, two gazes painted into one head. One smiled faintly, lips curved as though remembering pleasure. The other face, same skin, same eyes, shed tears that glistened faintly in the failing light. The sisters avoided looking up when they passed beneath it. Yet tonight, something in the air pulled their eyes upward, a pressure like the weight of watching. The elder spoke first. "It's changed again." The younger didn't answer. Her hands trembled around the banister. The wood was damp, though no rain had entered. The faces were clearer now than they had been in years. The smiling one seemed almost alive, cheeks warmed with blood, eyes glinting with cruel fondness. The weeping one looked softer, younger, and the tears were no longer paint. They dripped slow and real, falling soundlessly to the floor. "Mother had it commissioned before the fever took her," the elder said, "but she never told who it was meant to be." "Maybe she didn't know," the younger whispered. Outside, the wind pressed against the shutters like something pleading to be let in. The candles along the hall flickered in unison, one by one bending toward the portrait as if in reverence. The elder reached for a candelabrum and lifted it high. The flame shook, spilling warm light across the painted faces. The smiling half gleamed like polished flesh. The weeping one seemed to sink deeper into shadow. The line where they met, where smile and sorrow divided, was no longer a painter's stroke. It pulsed faintly like a vein. "Do you see it?" the elder murmured. "I see her," the younger said. "Her who?" But the younger only shook her head and backed away. The clock struck once, twice, then stopped before the third toll. A faint sound followed, a whisper, dry as parchment being torn. It came from the canvas itself. The sisters stood frozen. The portrait breathed, not deep, not loud, just the soft intake of air through painted lips. Then another, the sound of life waking where there should be none. The smiling face turned its gaze toward the elder, and the weeping one toward the younger. They both stepped back at once, but the floor moaned beneath their feet. The light in the hall dimmed to a red dusk. Shadows from the candelabra stretched long and crooked across the wall, forming the shapes of figures that should not exist. The elder forced her breath steady. "It's just oil and canvas," she said. But the younger's eyes were wide. "Then why is it bleeding?" A thin red line slid from the edge of the frame, tracing down the wall like a vein opened by accident. It smelled faintly of rust and salt. The elder dropped the candle. Flame met floor, hissed out. Darkness took the hall, thick, trembling. In that dark, the portrait spoke. Two voices. One whispering, one sobbing. Both echoing from inside the same throat. "You left us here." The sisters clung to each other. The younger whispered, "Who?" The smiling face laughed, a sound like dry leaves. The weeping one shuddered. Then both mouths opened wide, stretching too far for anything human. From the gash where the two faces met, something pale began to press through, thin as skin, wet as birth. "A hand, a woman's hand," the elder screamed. The sound was swallowed by the walls. The house loved screams. It had grown fat on them. The hand reached, grasped the gilded frame, and another followed. From within the painting, something began to crawl out, slow, deliberate, the way a memory returns after years of burial. The sisters ran. But every step up the staircase took them down instead. Every turn brought them back beneath the portrait. The house would not let them leave until the thing inside had finished coming through. When the lightning flashed, they saw it whole, the painted woman, now alive, her body half flesh, half paint. One half still beautiful, the other smeared and ruined by centuries of tears. She whispered with two voices, both layered over one another. "We were made to watch. Now you will too." Then the lights died. When the storm passed, the house fell silent. The portrait hung again, still serene, whole. Only now beneath it, two faint smears of blood marked the floor where the sisters had once stood, and the painted faces of both of them as were smiling. By morning, the air inside the plantation had grown colder, the kind of chill that seeps not from the weather, but from memory. The sisters kept the lamps burning even through the day, yet the light never seemed to touch the far corners of the rooms. It faded before it reached them, as though afraid to trespass. The whisper began again near dusk. At first it was only a sound beneath the kitchen floor, soft, rhythmic, almost like the cooing of doves. But the longer one listened, the more it shifted. The sound began to form syllables. Then names. Their names. The elder sister was the first to hear it clearly. She froze mid-step while stirring the evening broth, the ladle dripping over the fire. A voice beneath the planks, low, trembling and human. She told herself it was the wind, that it crawled under the house the way sorrow did through bones. But the wind did not beg. And this voice did. Please, it murmured. I can't see the light. Let me out. The younger sister found her kneeling near the stove, ear pressed to the warped floorboards. What are you doing? The elder's eyes flicked upward. Listening to what? She hesitated, her voice barely a whisper. The cellar door is speaking again. The younger laughed, though the sound cracked in her throat. There's no door down there anymore. We had it sealed after... She didn't finish the sentence. Both knew what after meant, though neither dared name it. The floor creaked once more. Beneath their feet, a long scraping sound, wood against stone, the slow drag of something trying to rise. Maybe it's an animal, the younger said. A raccoon, a fox, the elder cut her off. Then why does it say your name? The fire went out as though the air had been stolen from the room. In the silence that followed, the whisper came again. This time it was clearer and closer. You buried me wrong. The sisters clutched each other. Neither moved toward the trapdoor hidden beneath the kitchen rug. It had been boarded shut for years. Nails black with age, the wood swollen and warped. But the sound was directly below it now, rising through the seams like breath through teeth. The younger backed away. Don't answer it. The elder whispered, if it knows our names, it already has. The walls began to tremble faintly, as though the house were exhaling. The pots hanging over the stove clanged softly against one another. In the corner, a jar of sugar toppled, spilling a white trail across the counter, a trail that spelled something before their eyes. S-O-R-R-Y. The elder dropped to her knees. Who are you? She called through the boards. At once everything went still. The air turned heavy, tasting of damp earth. Then, faintly like a dream spoken backward, a reply. I was the one who waited. The sound of scraping began again. Only now it came with the rhythm of steps on a staircase. Wooden steps unseen, steps that shouldn't exist anymore. The younger screamed, tearing the rug away. Beneath it, the outline of the old trapdoor was visible. The boards bowed from pressure below. One nail jerked upward, then another, pulled free from within. Help me seal it, the elder shouted. But her sister stood frozen. It's not trying to come out, she whispered. It's trying to remember. A hand broke through the wood. Not flesh, but a pale shape like smoke pressed into form. It reached up, groping blindly in the air before curling around the leg of the table. The sisters stumbled back. The table shook, the dishes rattling. From below came the same voice, now doubled, the echo of a soul split between worlds. The house kept me. It keeps all of us. The cellar door burst open, flinging splinters into the air. The smell that rose was not of decay, but of rain-soaked soil and magnolia roots, as if the earth itself had been breathing there all along. A dim glow came from below. Inside that glow moved shapes, not bodies, not ghosts, but echoes. They had no eyes, no mouths, only outlines of people that shimmered like candlelight reflected in water. They swayed together, whispering fragments of prayers, of regrets, of half-remembered lullabies. The younger sister sank to her knees. It's them, she murmured. Who? All who served. All who were silenced. The elder stared at her. They're not supposed to come back. The younger's eyes glistened. Maybe they never left. The air pulsed deep and slow, as though the house itself drew breath again. The whisper became a chorus now, hundreds of faint interwoven voices rising from below. And among them, clear as a bell, one voice, a familiar, trembling, spoke both their names together. Daughters of sorrow. You have come home, the glow brightened. The cellar door yawned wider, and then, with a groan like timber splitting under too much truth, the entire kitchen floor began to sink, the boards bending downward, drawn toward that open dark. The sisters clung to each other as the light above them dimmed, the cellar swallowing the room inch by inch. The last thing they saw was the portrait in the hall, its twin faces watching through the doorway, both smiling now. Then the floor gave way entirely, and the whisper became a roar. Night fell soft as soot. The magnolia trees whispered against the window panes, their petals drifting like pale ghosts across the sill. Somewhere in the darkened house a lullaby began, faint, broken, as though sung through the walls of a dream. There was no cradle anymore. It had been burned, they said, long ago, yet its song remained. The sisters sat by the parlor fire trying to forget the cellar's voice, but every silence between the crackling wood seemed to breathe. When the younger rose to shut the window, the lullaby swelled. The melody was simple, old, one their mother had once hummed in the nursery, before fever and secrets took her voice. She froze. "Do you hear it again?" the elder asked, not looking up. The younger turned. "It's coming from upstairs." A coldness entered the room as though someone had opened a door to winter. The fire faltered. In the reflection of the mantel mirror, two shadows stood where the sisters were, and behind them a third, smaller, swaying gently. The elder caught the motion in the glass. "Don't look," she whispered. But the younger was already climbing the stairs. Each step moaned beneath her feet. The melody followed her, growing clearer the higher she climbed. By the time she reached the nursery door, long sealed, untouched since the house's last birth, the song had turned to humming. She placed a trembling hand on the knob. It was warm. Inside, moonlight poured across the floorboards, silvering the dust that hung in the air like breath. The cradle was there, rebuilt, impossibly whole, rocking ever so slightly without a hand to touch it. The lullaby came from within. The elder joined her at the threshold, her voice small. "Don't go closer." The younger took a step anyway. "It's only a song," she murmured. But when she reached the cradle, the melody stopped. The rocking slowed. The silence that followed was heavier than any scream. She leaned forward. The cradle was empty, only a faint indentation in the sheets as though something invisible had just risen from it. Then, a sigh. Soft right beside her ear. "Hush now." She stumbled back into her sister's arms. The cradle began to rock again, violently now, the wood creaking under an unseen weight. From somewhere deep in the house, another sound answered. Not quite a cry, not quite laughter. The sisters clung together, watching as the cradle tipped forward and fell still. The elder forced out words. "There was never a child." The younger shook her head. "Then whose name did Mother whisper every night before she died?" The window burst open, the wind flooding the room with the scent of magnolia and grave soil. The cradle rocked once more, then stopped abruptly, as if a hand had steadied it. In the lull that followed, a voice on high, breathless, tender, sang the final verse of the old lullaby. "Sleep where the roots remember, sleep where the sorrow grows." The sisters sank to their knees. The sound came now from the floor beneath the cradle, a muffled heartbeat, steady and small. The boards there began to darken, as if dampened from below. The elder pressed a hand against the spot. It was warm, pulsing faintly. "The cellar," she breathed. "It reaches even here." The younger looked toward the window, her face pale in the moonlight. "It's not the cellar anymore. It's the house." They fled the nursery, but the song followed, not through the air but through the walls, through the very timbers of the house that groaned with the rhythm of a lullaby. Downstairs, every door had opened on its own. The wind carried the tune from room to room until the entire plantation seemed to hum like a mother soothing her dead. And then, from the parlor, came the soft thump of wood against wood, a rocking motion. When they turned, they saw it, an empty chair moving gently by the fire, as though someone unseen were cradling something in their arms. A woman's voice, distant but clear, whispered through the sound of the flames, "Hush, my love. Hush, my sorrow." The fire dimmed, the light curling inward. Upstairs, the cradle stopped rocking, and for the first time that night, the lullaby ceased. But from the hearth below, wrapped in the last ember's glow, came a new cry, soft, fragile, a newborn's wail. The elder dropped to the floor, hands pressed to her ears. "It's not real," she gasped. The younger stared into the fire, trembling. "Then why does it sound like our name?" The cry turned into laughter. The flames flickered once and then went out. The moon laid itself low over the fields that night, pale and swollen as if watching from a great wound in the sky. Beneath its light the cotton swayed softly, endless white and whispering. It looked beautiful from the window, the way sorrow sometimes does when seen from a distance. But by morning, the beauty curdled. The sisters woke to a scream carried from the fields, not sharp, but long and breaking like a hymn torn apart. When they rushed outside, the dawn had not yet warmed the earth. Dew clung to every stalk of cotton, but the dew was red. From the porch steps to the tree line, the land bled. No footsteps marked the soil. No tool lay dropped, yet every branch of cotton dripped, as though it had drawn from a living vein in the night. The harvesters, what few still worked the cursed estate, stood frozen, caps in hand, whispering prayers older than the land itself. The younger sister knelt, touching one of the red blossoms. "It's too much to be blood," she said, though her fingers trembled. The elder stared toward the tree line. "It's never too much for this place." From somewhere beyond the rows came a faint rustle, a rhythm too even for wind, too soft for any beast. The sound of hands, picking, the air filled with it, a slow plucking, steady, endless. Invisible hands stripping the fields, unseen and tireless. "Who's working at this hour?" the younger whispered. "No one living," said the elder. The cotton shifted again, forming the faintest trace of figures beneath the moonlight, outlines bent to labor, shoulders bowed, the silver of their forms gleaming faintly before fading like mist. The sisters watched, unable to speak, as the shapes moved row to row, silent, eternal, and unfree. The wind changed, carrying a smell of iron and salt, the smell of old blood and rusted chains. Then, from the far end of the field, something lifted its head. A figure. Half shadow, half shimmer. Its eyes glowed faintly with moonlight caught in tears. It raised a hand, and where it pointed, the cotton began to burn, not with fire but with color, a deep and living red that spread outward like a slow infection. The elder took a step back. "We should not have come here." The younger's voice shook. "We didn't, it came to us." The plucking stopped. The air held its breath. Then the ground itself began to move, not shaking, not rumbling, but breathing, as though beneath the roots of every stalk, something vast turned in its sleep. The sisters ran, but as they neared the porch, the house loomed different, larger somehow, the windows wide and watching. Behind them, the fields whispered a name, not theirs, not human, a name older than the soil. The elder clutched her chest. "It's calling them. The dead!" "No," she said, "the land." The moon sank lower, pressing its pale light flat against the fields. Every stalk of cotton now gleamed crimson, each tip a small flame in the darkness. Then came the sound again, the plucking, relentless, steady. But this time it was closer. When the sisters turned, they saw them, dozens of figures walking out of the cotton, hands moving as if still working, eyes blind, faces hollow. Their clothes hung in tatters, their feet dragging dust. They carried the harvest in silence, arms full of red, dripping cotton that left streaks along their paths, like the veins of the earth itself. The younger tried to speak, but found her voice gone. The elder raised her hand in trembling reverence. "They're not angry," she whispered. "They're remembering." The figures passed by without turning their heads, moving toward the house. The door opened for them without touch, the hinges sighing like an exhale. Inside, the portrait above the stairs shuddered on its frame. The twin faces bled anew, each drop falling to the floor in time with the steps of the dead entering below. The house drank it all. By sunrise, the field stood still again, white bright, clean as though nothing had ever happened. But if one looked closely, the cotton was not white. It only pretended to be. Beneath the light, each petal carried a blush of faint red, as if it remembered being touched by the dead. The sisters never went to the fields again. Yet sometimes when the wind moved just right, they could hear it, that ceaseless plucking, that slow laboring of unseen hands, and always in the morning they found the baskets by the porch, full. It arrived without footsteps, without messenger. The morning found it waiting upon the parlor table, folded once, sealed with a wax mark that had long since melted into a dark stain. No one knew who had brought it. The doors were locked, and yet the scent of smoke lingered in every room, as though the letter had been carried through fire to reach them. The elder stood above it for an hour before daring to touch it. "Don't," the younger warned. "Nothing that comes here comes alone." But curiosity is a door that never stays shut for long. The wax seal bore a crest, faint, cracked, 2 magnolia blooms crossed with a serpent between them. Neither sister recognized it, though both felt something stir deep in their memory, as if they had once seen that same emblem, stitched into the corner of a forgotten dream. The paper was brittle but warm to the touch, like skin fevered with confession. When the elder broke the seal, the faintest breath of ash rose from it, a sigh escaping into the still air. Inside were 3 lines, written in a hand neither of them could mistake. It was their mother's. "What you bury is what you become. The debt is not paid. Do not let the house keep my name." The ink shimmered wet despite the years that must have passed since it was written. The younger recoiled. "She's been dead 10 years. Then who brought it? From the hearth came the faint pop of cooling coals, though the fire had not been lit since the night before. Smoke coiled upward, thin, grey, deliberate, curling toward the letter as if beckoned. The elder lifted the page toward the flame. "We'll end it." The paper caught instantly, but the fire did not consume it. Instead, the flame turned black, writhing around the edges like a living thing. The letter hissed, sharp, wet, like burning flesh. The sisters dropped it, but it did not fall. It floated in the air between them, glowing faintly from within. Each word upon the page began to change, the ink bleeding, shifting, twisting itself into shapes that were not letters anymore. The symbols pulsed like veins. The younger pressed her palms to her eyes. "I can't look." The elder couldn't look away. The parchment's glow reflected in her pupils, word by cursed word, etching themselves there, branding their meaning into her sight. Every line darkened her gaze until her eyes were no longer brown, but the color of burnt bone. "Make it stop," the younger cried. The elder whispered, "It's showing me." "What?" "What we were built on." The letter unfurled itself like wings. Ash fell around them in a fine rain. The smoke that rose from it carried whispers, names, hundreds of them, spoken in unison and then swallowed by silence. The words reformed again, and this time both sisters could read them. "The land remembers. The blood beneath it feeds the bloom, and the house has chosen new keepers." The room grew hot. The portraits on the walls began to weep resin that looked like tar. The air shimmered as though the whole house had caught fever. The younger tried to grab the letter, to tear it, but it turned to flame in her hands, not burning her but seeping into her skin. The black fire crawled up her wrists, spreading ink-like veins that pulsed beneath the surface. She screamed, shaking her arms, but the fire only sank deeper until the words were gone, and she bore the mark of the serpent and magnolia across her palms. The elder staggered backward, eyes wide, unseeing. "I can read it still," she whispered. "It's inside now." Outside the wind rose, the same wind that carried the whispers through the cotton fields, that breathed beneath the cellar door. It pressed against the house as if urging its approval. The letter fluttered once more, turning in the air like a leaf caught in a storm. Then it fell into the fire and finally turned to ash. But the ash did not settle. It lifted, drifted toward the ceiling, and disappeared into the wooden beams as though feeding them. The sisters stood in silence. The elder blinked and tears ran black down her cheeks. "I see them all," she murmured, "every name, every hand." The younger looked down at her palms, where the symbol still faintly glowed. "And they see us." The house creaked in reply, slow, pleased, alive. Somewhere deep in the walls a faint scratching began, the sound of a quill writing upon paper. Yet there was no ink, no desk, no hand, only the slow, deliberate sound of history continuing itself. And when the sisters finally dared to look into the mirror above the mantel, they saw not their reflections but words, black and burning, forming where their faces should have been. "The debt is not paid." The house had not known laughter in years, yet that night it prepared itself for guests. The candles lit without hands. The clock struck 13. And from the dining hall came the heavy drag of chairs being drawn across the floor, one after another, until 12 places waited in perfect symmetry. No one had entered that room since the night their father's voice went silent, mid-blessing. Dust had claimed every corner. Cobwebs stitched the chandelier like mourning lace, yet now it gleamed. Every silver fork polished, every goblet filled, every plate waiting, steaming faintly with heat that had no source. The sisters stood at the doorway. The elder whispered, "It's expecting us." The younger shook her head. "No, it's remembering them." Still, they stepped inside, because what else could they do when the house called their names with the sound of rattling dishes? The air hung thick with the perfume of rot masked by roses. The table stretched impossibly long, its mahogany darker than it had been in daylight, almost red, as if the grain itself had been dyed by something that once lived. At the head of the table, the high-backed chair stood empty. The master's seat. Its cushion was indented, though no one sat there. "Who set this?" the younger asked. The elder traced a finger along a plate. "The house did." Her fingertip came away stained crimson. "It wants witnesses." A slow creak echoed from the far end. One of the chairs, and the smallest, pulled itself out. The silverware around it clattered softly, arranging, adjusting as though awaiting a child who would never come. Then came the others. One by one, 11 chairs slid outward, each movement patient, measured, too deliberate to be the wind. The goblets trembled, the red liquid within them rippling. The scent grew thicker, not wine, not anything from vine or fruit. It was copper and sorrow, regret distilled to liquid form. The elder's throat tightened. "We should leave." But the house had already decided otherwise. A sound rose from the empty chairs, not voices, but the faint hum of breath drawn through lips that no longer existed. It was the sound of inhaling before speech, of memories gathering their courage to be spoken. The younger felt it first, a sudden cold beside her, like a hand brushing her shoulder. Then came another across the table. The air shimmered above each chair, warping the candlelight, and the sisters began to see shapes form, faint outlines, seated postures, silhouettes draped in shadow and silk. They were all there. Every lost guest. At the far end, their father's form took shape. Head bowed, hands clasped, eyes nothing but hollow darkness. Across from him sat their mother, lips curled into the faintest smile, as though the grave had not silenced her appetite. Between them, the rest. Aunts, uncles, neighbors, long buried. Even the overseer who vanished in the flood. All gathered again beneath the Magnolia moon, waiting for the sisters to take their place among them. The elder's voice broke. "Why now?" Her mother's form lifted its head. When she spoke, the sound came not from her mouth but from the clinking of the silverware. Because the debt must eat, the goblets shook. The red liquid spilled, streaking down the tablecloth, pooling in slow, viscous streams. The plates began to fill themselves, first with shadow, then with form. Meat, pale and pulsing, bread that bled when torn. The sisters backed away, but the chairs moved again, this time closer. The high-backed master's seat turned toward them, slow as a predator. The elder felt the pressure in her chest, the house breathing with her heartbeat. "It wants us to join," she whispered. The younger's eyes glistened. "And if we don't?" "Then it will serve us." The chandelier swayed, though no wind passed. Candlelight danced over the spectral faces, revealing flashes of expression, hunger, accusation, sorrow too deep for forgiveness. The sound of forks scraping against porcelain grew deafening, then silence. Every figure turned its hollow gaze to the sisters. The father's form lifted a glass, holding it high, though the hand that held it was nothing but smoke. "To the keepers of what we built," came the whisper, carried on 12 unseen tongues. "To the blood that binds the feast." The sisters trembled. The elder spoke first. "And we are not yours." The younger, weaker, "We didn't build this." From every corner came the same reply, layered, overlapping, a whispering chorus that sounded like the rustling of dry leaves in a graveyard wind. "No one ever does." The goblets all tipped in unison. The red liquid poured across the table, running toward the sisters like a living tide. It hit their shoes, their hems creeping upward with impossible weight. The elder screamed, grabbing her sister's hand and pulling her back, but the house groaned in disapproval. The doors slamming shut, the chandeliers dimming to a sickly glow. Then, from the head of the table, the master's chair turned again, not toward them, but toward the empty space beyond, as if awaiting the next arrival. The sisters stumbled backward into the hall, drenched, breathless, hearing the final toast echo long after they fled. To those who dine and never leave. And when the younger dared to look back, she saw that 2 new chairs had pulled themselves out, side by side, waiting for them. The first toll came soft, a sound too small to belong to iron. Then came the second and the third, each heavier, slower, until the air itself seemed to recoil. The sound did not move forward into night, but backward into something older, darker, unfinished. The sisters were not asleep when it began. They had learned that sleep in this house was an invitation. They sat beside the cold hearth, watching the embers fade to ash when the clock struck 12, and then one more. 13. The house trembled. The moonlight outside wavered as if the sky had exhaled, and in the reflection of the window, the sisters saw something impossible, their own faces blinking out of rhythm. The elder rose first. "It's only the glass," she whispered. But the reflection did not mimic her lips. It smiled. From somewhere beyond the walls came the faint, wrong chime of the chapel bell, not from the steeple, but from beneath the earth, each toll unspooling time itself. The night unmade itself by degrees. The candles grew taller. The ashes reassembled into logs. The scent of supper drifted through the air, though the plates had been cold for weeks. "Do you feel that?" the younger murmured. The elder nodded. "It's going backward." Outside, the magnolia trees shed their blossoms in reverse, white petals lifting from the soil and stitching themselves back into bloom. The sky turned a deep bruise of fading dusk, swallowing the stars. Then came the whisper, as low and coaxing, not from the air, but from the mirrors. "Step out. Step home." The mirrors had been covered since the funeral, their frames veiled in black lace. Yet now the veils fluttered as though stirred by breath. Beneath the lace, faint movement shimmered. Their reflections were no longer reflections. They were waiting things. The younger reached toward one, drawn by the sound of her own voice echoing softly within it. "Don't!" the elder hissed, gripping her wrist. But the younger only whispered, "She's crying." She was right. From the glass came the sound of quiet, rhythmic sobbing, a perfect mirror of her own. The lace slipped. Behind it stood 2 women, the sisters' faces but altered. Their eyes glowed faintly like candles seen through fog. Their mouths trembled between grief and hunger. The elder's throat went dry. "Those aren't us." "They will be," the mirror replied. The bell tolled again, the 10th, the 11th, and with each strike, the reflections grew clearer, the glass thinner, the air colder. Every sound in the house warped, footsteps echoing before they were taken, doors creaking shut that had not yet opened. On the 12th toll, the elder felt a pressure behind her eyes, a pulse like memory trying to escape. She saw flashes of the house as it had been, sunlight, laughter, white dresses, voices calling through the orchard. Then the same orchard, decades older, rotting, roots feeding on something that should never have been buried. The 13th toll came like a heartbeat under the floor. The mirrors shattered outward, not with shards but with figures. They stepped through slowly, like breath turning solid. The mirrored sisters wore the same gowns, but theirs were wet with something dark and old. Their eyes were the color of dying fire. The elder backed away, her voice a rasp. "What do you want?" Her other self smiled. "To finish what you began." The house moaned as the world continued to rewind. The furniture rearranged itself. The dust lifted. The air filled with hymns that had not been sung in 50 years. And outside in the chapel graveyard, the crosses began to lean upright. The soil rising to swallow the graves closed. The reflections moved in perfect synchrony now, save for one thing. Their lips didn't match the words. They were mouthing something else entirely, something like a prayer or a curse. The younger fell to her knees. "Make it stop!" The other, her, knelt too, pressing one cold hand against the glass between them, only there was no glass anymore. The hand left a print, damp and red. Then the bells began to ring faster. The sound grew sharper, thinner, until it became a single endless tone. Time itself trembled, caught between strike and silence. The reflections turned, glancing toward the window. Outside, the magnolia blossoms began to fall again, but this time they turned black before touching the ground. The elder gathered her sister, forcing her toward the door. Behind them, the mirror world pulsed, still living, still awake. As they fled down the hall, every mirror they passed flickered with faces, Not just theirs, but dozens of others. Some familiar, some not. Or watching. All smiling too widely. The final sound they heard before the door slammed shut was the 13th bell ringing one last time. But backward, and somewhere deep inside the walls, the sound of their laughter followed them, echoing softly, as if their reflections were still out there, walking the fields under a reversed moon. Morning did not rise amid peeled. The sky unwrapped itself like old paint from wood, flaking pale light over a land that no longer remembered warmth. The river, once a ribbon of black glass, churned white as bone, a current of milk and morning that moved without sound. No birds sang. No wind stirred. The magnolia trees stood heavy with blossoms that should not have bloomed, not in that month, not after what had been done beneath them. Each petal drooped with dew that smelled faintly of salt and iron. The plantation was gone. Not burned. Not ruined, simply absent, as though the earth had grown tired of remembering and folded it inward. Only the chimneys remained, standing like gravestones, weeping soot into the new light. Down by the riverbank, the sisters' house had collapsed into its own reflection. The roof floated for a while, then sank, vanishing beneath the white current. Yet sometimes the water bulged, as if the house still breathed below, exhaling slow bubbles that never reached the surface. They said the bells in the chapel rang one last time that dawn, not backward, but hollow. A sound like apology swallowed by fog. And with that, the house was forgotten by all but the magnolias. But flowers remember differently. Every year, when the blossoms came too soon, before the heat, before the season, the air filled with whispers. The kind that moved from petal to petal, name to name. Some said the wind was carrying the sisters' voices, soft and penitent. Others claimed it was the sound of something still trapped beneath the roots, waiting for the earth to thaw. By noon, the river had spread. Its white waters rolled through the fields, through the hollow of the orchard, through the chapel's open door. Where the altar once stood, a single goblet drifted past, polished, unbroken, filled to the rim with water so pale it almost glowed. Children who wandered too close to the bank told of seeing two shapes beneath the surface. Two women, walking slowly, their gowns trailing like smoke. Their eyes were closed, but their mouths moved, whispering through the current. One for sin, one for sorrow. One to stay, one to follow. When the sun reached its height, the water stilled. Every ripple froze into glass. The magnolia petals began to fall again, turning the river white a second time. And there, in the shimmer between reflection and depth, the plantation lived once more. For just a breath, the veranda standing whole, the porch lamps lit, a shadow passing across the upper window, two figures hand in hand. Then the image broke. The water resumed its slow, silent flow. By evening, nothing of the house could be found. Only the scent of magnolia and the echo of those names, faint, reverent, endless. Locals would say that the soil there was wrong, that it refused to grow anything but flowers. Others whispered that on the 13th night of summer, when the bells ring backward in memory, the river still runs white, and if you listen closely, you can hear the sisters singing their lullaby across the current. No one goes near after dark. Not since the year the moon reflected two faces instead of one. Not since the morning when the magnolias bloomed in winter and would not die, for some roots once fed never let go, and some sins washed in white only sink deeper.